So, is telling somebody don't look under the bed kind of like don't talk about Fight Club? Because technically you're supposed to do it, otherwise you can't save your brother and help him blow up a credit card building with your imaginary friend? I don't know. Let's roll the intro.
Musical styles are still a very important form of communication for our young people. Hi, I'm Joe Feinstein.
Welcome to Spooky Season. No spoilers on the films, but I am going to be keeping to the Halloween theme this month, so make sure you subscribe to find out what other films I'm going to be covering for the channel. Now, if you're a returning viewer, you'll know this isn't the first Disney Channel movie that I've covered. I've previously done Luck of the Irish, which was a film. No one can deny that they made that film. I also covered Johnny Tsunami, which will always have a special place in my heart. But I thought it would be fun to look at some other Disney Channel films to see if the writing overall got any better. I mean, it can't get worse, right? Right? To get the cast out of the way, our lead character is played by Erin Chambers. Now, prior to appearing on screen for acting, she did some supplementary voice acting work for two different Studio Ghibli projects, Whisper of the Heart and My Neighbors the Yamadas, and would go on to have a long-standing role in General Hospital. Ty Hodgkins, who plays her imaginary friend, would go on to be in Even Stevens and have a long-running film and music career. Robin Riker, who plays the mom, would actually be in General Hospital as well, not to mention an extensive TV career going all the way back to MASH in 1975. Steven Tobolowsky plays the dad, and he's one of those actors who you kinda recognize but can't really put a name to or think of something off the top of your head that he's been in, but he's popped up in Glee, Californication, Heroes, and a whole ton of other things. Last but certainly not least, there's Steve Valentine as the Boogeyman. Now, full disclosure, I haven't seen any of his other live-action work, although if you're a fan of Crossing Jordan, you're certainly going to recognize him. But why I'm so giddy is because if you're a fellow gamer, you'll recall that he provides the voice of Alistair in Dragon Age Origins. There are two other people I want to speak about before I get on to the main film itself. I do have timestamps set up, so if you want to jump around to whatever point you want to hear me talk about, feel free to do so. But I encourage you to stick with me for a moment because they're arguably the most two important people, and it'll help explain why I both love this film and find it an absolute mess. Director Kenneth Johnson and writer Mark Edward Edens. Johnson is a man who only months prior gave us another Disney Channel film, Xenon, Girl of the 21st Century. Make my heart go, my supernova girl. He helped write and direct for The Incredible Hulk, The $6 Million Man, and V, to name a very select few. And prior to this film, Edens had a large hand in the writing for several big projects, including the original X-Men animated series and The Real Ghostbusters. So when you pair these two up and give them a Disney-level budget to play with, it actually makes a lot of sense as to why this film turned out the way it did. Now, I usually talk about the good stuff first and then leave my gripes for last, but given I only really have one gripe with the film, I might as well get that out of the way first. Now, I fully understand that, especially with this era of DCOMs, you have to have a certain level of suspension of disbelief. Maybe more none so than this film, maybe a couple others, but even that being said, I find the paranoia of the film something quite baffling. Once Fran has her principal meeting and is shown talking to herself in public, it makes far more sense when people question her sanity. But from the start of the film, it's kind of a different story. Because when one of the teacher's cars get egged, he immediately suspects Fran for some reason, despite all the other kids who were outside well beforehand and laughing at the situation. The moment Fran says if the Jell-O went missing, someone must have taken it, the whole family randomly starts suspecting her, despite the fact that she's clearly never done stuff like that before. And Joe decides that Fran must have stayed up all night and planted a message in her own yard to reveal that Joe likes Fran's brother. The students at school think that she's the one who spray painted all of the letter B's on everyone's lockers because hers doesn't have one. And for a split moment, you think, okay, that actually seems suspicious to the outside observer. But then we see there's a B on the inside of her locker, yet somehow that's still confirmation for everyone that she did it. Between this and the whole villain decision of, I'd rather spook you and play pranks than actually do anything, just gives off this whole Tim Curry Pennywise, Twin Peaks kind of vibe that just makes it hard to take seriously. See, that wasn't so bad. So now on to the good stuff. Starting with my biggest point, which is actually just how well they handled the emotional punches of the story itself. Throughout the first half of the film, we're led to believe that Larry is Fran's imaginary friend, despite the fact that one of the first things he says is,
I do not have an imaginary friend.
Did I say I was your imaginary friend?
Because only she can see him, you just think, well, it's not like anyone else is a candidate. And you're thrown off the trail even more when Darwin says that the other kids in the park could see Larry, but that he himself could not. But when Larry confirms the fact that,
Why could the kids in the park see you?
Those were little kids' friends. They could see anything they want.
it brings up this question of why Darwin couldn't see him. Also, I'm sorry, I have to pause for just a moment, because look, we see what you're doing. Naming your kids Darwin, Francis, and Albert, we see what you're doing. You're not clever, okay? Settle down. Just settle it down. Okay, now we can continue. Then the film makes us go back to thinking it only has to do with Fran, by Larry suggesting,
It says it right here. The boogeyman lives under your bed. It doesn't say which bed, but I figure if he's trying to ruin your life, it must be under your bed.
But not long after, it's revealed that Larry used to be Darwin's imaginary friend, and that the reason Darwin couldn't see Larry anymore is because Fran told him to grow up and stop believing in imaginary things while he was going through leukemia. When Larry pieces it together, he actually kind of loses it on Fran.
Then why didn't you give him some of your bone marrow, huh?
I wanted to help him, and the doctor said Bert was the only one who could do it.
I bet that was a relief.
No, I wanted to do it.
Safe! No, don't pretend with me, Fran. I know all about pretending.
It's kind of crazy to think that this is something that was talked about in a 90s Disney film. Not only the sickness itself, but the idea that Fran feels guilty that there's a part of her that was relieved that she didn't have to do the painful bone marrow procedure. Not only that, she then has to deal with the added guilt when she realizes it's her fault Larry's turning into a boogeyman. At its core, this is a film about the consequences of your actions from hiding from your feelings, and how doing so can affect your relationships. The other fun things aren't as important throughout the film, but they are still hilarious, so I can't help but not mention them. Francis's full name is Francis Bacon, which in the film, there's a quick joke being made about it being a reference to the British High Lord, who was contributed with having a hand in the modern scientific method as we know it. But given the spooky Stephen King-esque vibes throughout the film, I'd argue it's more so a nod to the painter Francis Bacon, known for his paintings that strive to portray everyday life in an abstract, triptych medium. Next, I know we don't spend much time there, but given the scale of the items and the spooky atmosphere, the boogie world kind of feels like The Borrowers meets Nightmare Before Christmas, and I just think that's kind of amusing. I also find it pretty amusing that Fran's dad just wants things to go back to quiet and normal so he can get back to cooking.
What happened to all the gelatin? I was going to make my wiggly fruit thing for dinner tonight. Besides, I have that roast I need to cook.
They also thought they were so clever adding Boogie Wonderland as the credit music.
Sam Lake, you hack!
But if I had to pick an absolute MVP / what the fuck moment, it's the fact that the Boogie book genuinely says that nuking your problems is a totally fine solution.
Man, if we had a thermonuclear device, that boogeyman would be toast.
Good lord, this was quite the watch. Entertaining, hilarious, sweet, and insane, all in equal measure. I certainly hope you enjoyed the video. Again, I'm going to have more Halloween-themed stuff coming soon, so be on the lookout. In the meantime, you know goddamn well what time it is.
Stop the presses!
Kenneth Johnson, the director, also directed Xenon Girl of the 21st Century with Raven-Symoné, who was in The Princess Diaries 2 with Anne Hathaway, who was in Alice in Wonderland with Johnny Depp, Who was in Sweeney Todd with Alan Rickman? Who was in the Harry Potter franchise with Richard Griffiths? Who was in A Muppets Christmas Letters to Santa in 2008? Happy spooky season, everybody. Again, more coming soon, be on the lookout. But in the meantime, I'm always curious. What do you think?
Musical styles are still a very important form of communication for our young people. Hi, I'm Joe Feinstein.